Welcome to the Yard, where faith and sports collide. I am not Marcus Preciado. My name is Marlon Gardinera. Hopefully some of you remember me. I've been here before. I'm a little shorter, a little wider, a little darker, but hopefully we give you a great message, and that should be easy because we have an amazing special guest. We've got with us today Todd Durkin. He's a trainer, an author, a mentor, a friend. I don't want to say anything like this in front of him, but I believe he's an angel. And please, I hope he forgets that I said that. But I do believe he was sent directly from above. Ladies and gentlemen, with us today, Todd Durkin.
Honored to be here, Coach.
What's up, TD?
Man, great to be on the show.
Oh, it's great to have you. Listen, I know you. You're a dear friend. I don't know if you know how dear a friend you are to me. I try not to tell you too many positive things because you bring your own energy to the world and it's amazing. But these folks don't know you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, first off, we spend a lot of time together as coaches right now on the football field, which is awesome. And football is part of my blood, it's part of my DNA. I played football from 5 years old to 25 years old, and now getting the opportunity to coach football is certainly special. With two sons, two of my three kids are for the Scripps Ranch High School program, but as an everyday career, that's not what I do all day long. I started my gym, Fitness Quest 10, year 2000, and the last 21 years, we've been changing lives, literally, not just athletes. I think sometimes people think, oh, you just work with pro athletes. That's part of what we do, part of what I do, but really what I'm always after is how can I change someone's life? And whether that be a mom or a dad, whether it be a grandma, grandpa, a kid who's looking to get faster, stronger, more explosive, or just get more confidence and self-esteem. To me, having the opportunity to change people's lives, that's what makes me tick.
All right, well, we're going to get to some of the people's lives you actually get to change, but let's be honest. How did you get into coaching football?
You. Actually, I always loved football. I considered football as a career. After I was done playing, I actually coached back in New Jersey for a year for my legendary high school football coach, Coach Wolf, who was a father-like figure to me. We won a state championship my first year, but then I got sidetracked and I made my way out to the West Coast, and lo and behold, I got so engrossed in business and training and coaching people through the sports performance side of things that I wasn't able to take my passion for coaching football, specifically quarterbacks and strength and conditioning, and to the next level from a personal level. And then when my sons were coming up through Pop Warner, when my son Luke decided to play Pop Warner, I think this is going to be great. I finally get to see him as a young quarterback. So day number one.
Well, now, and I'm going to step in here.
Man.
I'm going to step in here. When people find out who you work with, they're going to understand you understand football like the best of them. But I remember your introduction to football, at least as it related to your kids. You've got three beautiful kids, a beautiful wife. You're in the community. You do everything anyone could ever hope for someone to contribute to their community. But you actually had the nerve to show up to one of my Pop Warner football practices with a lawn chair. And I remember looking over at you thinking, oh, that must be for his daughter. Your daughter came with you. And I thought, well, that's going to be odd because she's going to be over there by herself for the next 2 hours. Because I think for some reason you thought you were going to watch the football practice. Is that what you thought?
I did.
Huh.
There's something called the dad hack. And my daughter, by the way, was like 3 years old. She was like 3, and Coach Gardinera walks over to me and says, excuse me, what are you doing in that lawn chair? Your daughter can sit in that. I need you to coach the quarterbacks. And I had to think about it for a moment because I literally was going to be a dad. And I just was looking forward to that day of just watching my kids play football and wear that dad hat. Because all day long, I was coaching a lot of football athletes, a lot of NFL guys, and I was really excited about the opportunity just to be a dad. That lasted for about 10 seconds.
Well, listen, since I feel like I gave you a real football coaching opportunity, I'm going to give you a little advice for this dad hat you're looking for. That's called being a grandfather, because that's about the next time you'll get to sit and watch people play football.
Well, let's not rush that. We don't want.
No rush. No rush. All right. Speaking of football players, I know you as a trainer of the stars, and there's a lot more to you, and we'll unpeel those layers of the onion. I know you as a trainer of the stars. You work with some pretty big name people, but for me personally, it actually says more about you than the stars. they come to you. They want what you have to offer. So obviously I wanted it in Pop Warner football, but these guys are finding you to train. Give us an example. Who are some of the people you work with?
Well, I'll tell you who the first guy I ever worked with, and depending on someone's age listening in today, may not know this person, but I think when you get started is always the hardest. The first athlete I ever worked with at the pro level, his name was LaDainian Tomlinson. He was the first round draft pick for the San Diego Chargers. So if you're below 20, you may not even remember the name LT. But LaDainian Tomlinson was the guy for the Chargers, and that was the first guy I ever worked with. And man, there's stories all around that. But I was really excited for that because I had set the intention to work with pro athletes, and I actually was in with the San Diego Chargers doing their massage therapy and body work after their games. That's how I met LT. When LT came to my gym, Fitness Quest 10, he about 3 months later brought his quarterback. That quarterback was Drew Brees. That was 2004, and for many years, 9 years to be exact, LT and Drew trained together. And for the last 18 years, I've trained Drew and what he's done with his craft. He's now obviously in his 20th year as he contemplates retirement or not. So those are two of the guys. Those were my first two athletes I ever got the chance to work with. There's been obviously a lot of others, but I think when you look back, it's always the beginning when you're green and trying to figure things out. Those two are very, very near and dear to my heart.
Well, and I'll tell the folks, because I don't know that they know this about you. You come with this level of energy, right? I actually don't think it's human. I know the positive effect because you do change people's lives. You're just one of those motivators, those mentors that makes things move. Now, you understand, you give me anxiety. I'm not one to continue to work out at the level that I did, way back when I was an elite athlete. But I get anxiety of the amount of energy you have. Where does that come from?
Honestly, for me, that passion comes from above. It is passion, and it's divine purpose. I think it takes a while sometimes to find your purpose in life. For me, growing up, I always wanted to be an NFL quarterback. That was my dream. From 5 to 25, my goal was I wanted to be an NFL quarterback, to the point where I actually took my dream after college. I went to school at William & Mary in Virginia, and I went overseas. I played in the World Football League. In the second year there, I blew out my back. 3 herniated discs, spinal stenosis, degenerative back disease, and this French doctor, I could still hear him say, "You have a back problem. The back career is over. Your football career is over." I'm like, no. Well, at age 25, when he said my football career was over, it was over. And that was a very dark time for me because I had to discover a new purpose and dream. Looking back now, 25 years later, it's to the point of like, that was God putting a new dream inside of me. I didn't know it. It took me 5 years to figure out, hey, let me start a business 5 years after that with no clients, no money, no business plan. Not a good way to start a business. No clients, no money, no business plan, but it was on pure passion. And it was on faith that somehow I was gonna take my original dream of being a football player and then this circuitous route to heal my own back pain without having surgery. When LT came to me, he said, I want to get my body right. I want to be pain-free. And when Drew came to me, all the way through when he tore his shoulder out of his socket in the 2005 season, these were all things that I was able to take my experience from my dream to be in the NFL to learning what it's like to be at the top and also at the bottom. And to the point, even now when I'm working with guys like Drew, it's like you always have to have a dream. And you better be relying on your faith when you're looking at what your dream is, because sometimes you get derailed. Sometimes your dream is your dream, it's not God's plan. Because now God was laughing at me the whole time saying, everything was perfect. Everything was perfect. You didn't see it at the time because you were beating yourself up and you were down, you're dark, sometimes even depressed of how you're gonna get through this time. And for me, I look back and I kind of like, man, I wish I even had stronger faith than in the plan. But when it's your dream, and that's what you want.
Listen, I've seen you train some of these people. And as much as they're elite athletes, and I'll use Drew Brees as an example, his work ethic is unbelievable. I think of an NFL quarterback, makes a lot of money, maybe they're living the easy life, the good life. This guy trains like he's going to war, and I've seen it. But I also see the energy you give and put into him. You don't have to self-motivate if you're in the room. You do it. And this is where, I hate to give you credit, I called you an angel. You've breathed that energy into me, and it hasn't been for fitness, ever. I don't want to work out. But I've had enough health issues and bumps in the road that sometimes I rely on you, even without asking, even without saying anything, to bring that energy, to remind me that there's more in me, I can do more, which is why I say the angel part.
I love you. I love you.
You're a pretty special person.
But here's why, is because I think everyone listening in today is one of my favorite verses, Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron. It's who you hang out with. It's who you surround yourself with. So I believe one of the reasons why I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the guys I work with is because I'm a firm believer in who you surround yourself with is ultimately going to determine your success. So from a biblical perspective, for me as a man of faith, I got to be careful who I'm hanging out with, and because it's going to affect the way I think, the way I act, the way anything happens. So all of that counts. So if I show up as strong energy, positive, the most optimistic person that you know, that I know, okay, then I'm going to put my fingerprint on anything I'm part of, just like you, Coach, is you have the ability to influence positive or negative like I do. So I think that's the old iron sharpens iron aspect. I think that's the reason why a lot of the guys have come back, not for 1 or 2 years, but for 10, 15, 20 years, because it's the environment you create. And as a coach myself, it's how do I continue to challenge someone who's already reached the peak?
Yeah.
I'm always after like, hey, when you become the best at what you do, how do you get better? If you're a kid out there, you should have the biggest aspirations to be the best that you can be, to not be like everyone else, than to be different. But what happens when you reach that peak? And I've been around that. I've been around not just athletes, but what got me out to California in the first place was working with a producer in Hollywood who produced Oprah Winfrey, Wheel of Fortune, and Jeopardy. And that guy sold his company for $2 billion when I was training him. $2 billion with a B. And he's leaning on me saying, what should I do? I think when you are sharp on the inside, that passion that comes through, that energy you feel, that is true divine passion. And I think when your passion aligns with your purpose, that's just authentic energy that's sustainable. It's not something you can go do one time and you'll go out there for a day or a week or even a season and be a rah-rah guy or gal. I'm talking about something that's sustainable for years.
Yeah. Listen, I'm one of the few people that gets to enjoy it on a regular basis. We live in the same community. You're here in San Diego. I know you're an author. What I can't figure out is how you managed to bottle all of this up into words in a book. How's that process for you?
When I was in 7th grade, my father taught me how to write. There was this award for Pop Warner All-American. You had to put together 5 essays. I sat down at a ping pong table with a legal pad, and he said, I want you to write these essays out. So I started writing these essays out. He said, no, you have to have a catchy opener. And I still remember, third and long. I called the play, what the play is. I could smell the green grass growing. And I had this real catchy opener of like, it's a beautiful day, and we get the first down, converts into a touchdown, and the crowd goes wild. Back when I wanted to be great. And I started to learn how to write and write. Writing is a skill. It's a skill that's being lost. So when I look at, now you bring up my 3rd book, Get Your Mind Right, I actually enjoy the process of writing now because it's part of what I do every day. Not always writing books, but even this morning, journaling. Free-form journaling, writing down in a journal your thoughts. Because I believe when you actually, not on your phone and not on a computer, although I do a lot of writing on a computer, when you actually write your thoughts on paper, old school style, is you get it out of your head and into the paper, which becomes your heart. And when you get your heart on fire, that becomes passion. So for me, it's become a skill, and it's a skill that is actually learned and taught, and it's something that you practice. So people say, I'm a horrible writer. I think it's actually like, I don't run the 40 good, or I don't throw the football well. Well, then practice it. Writing and speaking, it's a skill of how you do that.
Well, on that note, tell us about your last book.
Get Your Mind Right is the last book, June 2020. Now you got to think back, June 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, was a tough time. It was like the darkest time in not even U.S. history, in world history. And interesting enough, I wrote Get Your Mind Right in 2018 and 19. And I kept telling my publisher, we got to get this book out. We got to change lives. I want to reach 100,000 people with this book in the first month. They're like, We can't get it out when you want to get it out. It's going to come out January 1, 2020. I'm like, great. People are looking to transform their lives January. You know, it's a great time. But for whatever reason, they're like, hey, we have a delay. It's got to come out in April of 2020. So I'm bummed out that the book didn't come out, and it got put back to June. And I would think God has an interesting plan when things come out, because if there was ever a time that this world needed to get their mind right, it was in the middle of the pandemic on that. And I wouldn't wish to anyone to launch a book in the midst of a pandemic, but I believe the principles that are in that book, both the principles to get your mind right, the faith-based principles that are in there, including tapping into your whispers and living a life worth telling a story about, I think are powerful for anybody. And it's changed already in less than a year. It's changed thousands of people's lives. But realize this, I wrote that book right after a knee surgery I had, and I was in a chair and I was down. Sometimes when you're down and out is when you do your best work. I don't know about you, Coach, but I feel like I do my best work when I got my back against the wall. I feel like when the world's against me, or when things aren't going well, I feel like you're backed into a wall and you got to come up with your best work. I think part of that, growing up, youngest of 8 kids, divorced parents, no money. I grew up a little scrappy kid in New Jersey. I think now to this day, when the ship starts to sink, I don't want to say I like that, but I will say I do my best leadership when things around me are going astray. When everything else is chaotic, I kind of like that. I feel like I do my best servant leadership in that time.
Well, again, I feel like you're everywhere. I remember being quarantined in my house with my family. I'm vulnerable to the pandemic, for all the reasons you hear on the news. And we were locked down, but there was this one thing, and I really don't enjoy giving you this much credit. Every day at noon, some crazy guy gets on Facebook and Instagram with the Good News Network. I don't know if you knew that was the time of day where there was some energy and life brought back into the house. Not staring at an iPad, not looking at each other hour after hour after hour trying to figure out what you could do. You came in like a lightning bolt every day at noon.
Because the world needed it. The Good News Network started, and truth be told, when the pandemic happened, I told my team, we had 42 employees, listen, we're gonna be out of work for 2 weeks, and they'll be back. I'm going to go live every day at 12 noon, 7 days a week, not 5, 7 days a week, to just put positivity and optimism out to the world. It'll be 2 weeks long. 90 days later, I'm going live. And Melanie, my wife's like, what are you doing every day? Take a break. I'm like, I can't take a break. And honestly, I needed it as much as they needed it, right? I needed to find it, because everything around you was, if you watch the news, hopefully you don't watch that much news, the news was just terrible and everything was pessimism. I'm like, someone's got to put out some good news. So I would do some deep soul searching of where am I going to find some positivity? There's got to be some stories. And there were people doing some amazing things during the pandemic. I went live every day for 9 days. I said I'm going to go live until our gym opened back up, and it was 90 days later that we actually opened up for the first time. We eventually got closed down again for a second time, but it was 90 days that the Good News Network was there. And that thing was, sometimes it was 20 minutes long and sometimes it was an hour, but every day at 12 noon, I was going live. Side note on that, when I was in the 4th grade, my grandfather, who was on his deathbed, said this. He said, part of success in life is showing up every day, especially when you don't feel like it. He died a week later, and that day at his funeral, I vowed to myself, I heard his words, that I wasn't going to miss another day of school in my life. And from the 4th grade until the day I graduated high school, I didn't miss a day of school. I don't share that story very much, but it was always, I had ingrained in my head, show up, show up. So from the 4th grade to the 12th grade, I didn't miss a day of school. Now, there were days I was sick, I didn't feel like going to school and everything else, but I prided myself as I was going to be different than everyone else. I was going to show up, because you show up, and by showing up, you're successful. There's days at work for the last 21 years, I don't feel like showing up. You show up. So I think that 90-day thing in the middle of the pandemic was part of just my DNA of, that's a routine and that's a habit. It's not something like, oh, he or she's built different. I'm not built different. It was just in my head. Here's what you got to do. Show up when you don't feel like showing up.
Well, with that in mind, while I have you here, if I could get you to commit to coaching with me until I stop coaching and show up every day, that would be wonderful. Okay, that's probably a little bit much to ask. You know, everything about you, you just ooze having an impact. And as I said, not everybody gets a chance to hear from you. You have a show. There is a way for people to connect with you, people to hear this energy, feel this energy, meet some of the people you find interesting, some of the people you bring to the table.
Started a podcast a couple years ago called the Todd Durkin Impact Show. And what is impact? Interesting enough, standing for what you believe in. They always say, what, you stand for something or you'll fall for anything? 2010, Drew Brees had just won the Super Bowl. And I had always wanted to write a book, and I didn't have any books at that time. And it took Brees to get the MVP of that Super Bowl for me to get a book deal from Rodale and Men's Health. So here I am in New York City, downtown New York City. I'd already written the book. They said, if you want this book deal done, you got to write it in 10 weeks. And the 10 weeks was the worst time. It was the summer. And for me, the summers, I got all my guys prepping for the NFL. It's busy, it's crazy, summer camps, everything's going on. I wrote that book in 10 weeks. An entire book, 10 weeks, with keeping the schedule. The reason I share that is I fly back to New York, I go into the CEO of Rodale, I walk into his office, and he said, by the way, we changed the name of your book, The Impact Body Plan, to a book called True Strength. I said, no, you didn't. I said, it's Impact Body Plan. He said, no. When we think impact, we think car crash, and we don't want to sell a book called Impact Body Plan. I said, excuse me for a second. I left, I went down to the corner, I called up my literary agent. I said, by the way, they just changed the name of the book, and I'm not going to publish it with it other than the Impact Body Plan. I flew home to San Diego. I remember being on the plane where my book that I just wrote for 10 weeks, it's launching in another month. I said, I'm walking on the deal. I was willing to walk on that, away from a deal that had a dream for a long time, because I believed in the word impact. It was so deep in my heart. It was a spiritual thing. It was something that I couldn't put a word to it, but I do remember saying, I'm willing to walk from this deal. Fortunately, 3 weeks later, they came back and said, okay, it'll be the Impact Body Plan. Now, the reason I share that is because what happens is a brand becomes a brand when you live it. And to me, impact is legacy. And impact stands for something. Live inspired. Inspired means in spirit. If you're in spirit, you're inspired. And if you're tired, you're not inspired. M is master your craft. So I don't care if it's a high school athlete, boy or girl, if it's an entrepreneur, a mom or a dad, it's a pro athlete, you've got to master your craft. You mentioned Drew Brees. That guy in 20 years is still trying to master his craft. Still, the amount of film work that he spends, the energy he spends in trying to master his craft is incredible. The P is play at world class. The P in impact. Play at world class is get your mind right. How do you get your mind right when you don't feel like getting up, you don't feel like working out, you don't feel like eating what you should eat? Well, ultimately it's the discipline, the habits and the routines to do what you want to do. A is take action. So many times people come in like, hey, I want to be a starter on the high school team, or I want to get a college scholarship, or I want to be an all-star, all-pro in the NFL. Are you willing to take the actions necessary to do what I say you need to do if you want to get to that level and have a sustainable 7, 10 plus year career? Some say yes and never do it, and some say yes and actually do it, because the C is conditioned for greatness. When I say conditioned for greatness, I believe any one of us today, if you want to be great in the game of life, you have to condition for greatness. And I'm not just talking physically, I'm talking mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So when you can actually condition all areas of your life, I believe we're as strong as our weakest link, and ultimately, he or she who has their health has 1,000 dreams, he or she who does not has one. Get your health back. Heck, Marlon, you know that. Like, if you don't have your health, it's one thing. We got people in our own community right now fighting for their life, right? If you don't have your health, you got nothing. The T is be tenacious, tenacity, energy, fervor. Am I showing up with the fervor, the energy every day to make a difference? If I don't nourish my spirit, if I don't have that, guess what? I'm just an average Joe walking around and a coach that I'm taking up space. I'm eating oxygen without giving back. And that's not how I want to live my life. And based on my divine purpose, what God's imparted to me, and through my lessons and setbacks and adversities and everything else, it's like when I show up, I'm going to show up. And the days I don't feel like showing up, I'm showing up. Whether it be 90 days, whether it be 9 years, whatever, it's show up. To me, that's impact.
Yeah, well, you clearly have it. How do people find your show?
It could be, you can go on iTunes, Google, Spotify, anywhere you watch or listen to your podcasts we're there, YouTube included, the Todd Durkin Impact Show. And we have 2 shows a week that come out. It's all about high performance, about mindset, and it's about living with more impact every single day.
Well, I know the impact you have on me, and I appreciate you. I love you for it. You know I do. Faith in sports. I think you've got a story about how they collided, and it's almost an origin story about your relationship with Christ.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think a lot of people live with fear in their life, and I always say, what does fear stand for? It could be, false expectations appearing real. It could be facing everything and running, facing everything and rising. And I'm always like, faith over fear. How am I going to use faith over fear? As the youngest of 8 kids, I mentioned that mom and dad growing up, I learned sitting in pews at a young age. I grew up Catholic, and I just was ingrained that every week you show up to church. And I did from the time I was 5 all the way to 18, 19, until I went away to college. But as a college football player, before a game on Saturdays, you'd have chapel service. So on Friday night, still remember my freshman year, Pastor Freddie Mitchell down in Tidewater, Virginia, comes in for the Friday night chapel. Now this was a non-denominational church. I wasn't really familiar with what a non-denominational church was. I grew up Catholic. So I go down to the South, non-denominational, Pastor Freddie comes in and starts speaking about a relationship with Jesus. I'm like, relationship with Jesus? I thought it's about religion. I'm a Catholic. It's not about the religion, it's about a relationship. And it was that night that I accepted Christ as my Savior. And interesting enough, it was a year later, not less than a year later, that my mentor, my coach, my biggest cheerleader, my father, at the age of 58, suffered a massive heart attack and died. That rocked my world, because if without my faith, I would have been in a bad shape. Because I questioned my faith. Like, God, how can you take my father away from me? I'm in college and he's 58, I'm 20 years old. And that actually strengthened my faith. And through my career, including my back injury, which ended my dream to play professional football here, again, faith got me through it. Every adversity I've ever been through, it's always been one that my strength has been stronger. My faith has been stronger because of my relationship with Jesus, to the point of even now, through the pandemic, through the Good News Network. It's like, man, if I'm not getting my time in the Word, then my energy, my optimism, my goals, the changes I'm making right now in my life as I speak, of like, God, what do you have next for me? Chapter 9, I'm going to get you my rights, tap into the whispers. It doesn't matter what the world's telling you. Oh, you're successful as a coach or a trainer or entrepreneur or coach. It doesn't matter. What's God telling you what's next? That's what I'm tapping into now, is tapping into the whispers. What's God whispering? Because you may say, oh, you have all these accolades, you work with these athletes. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when I'm hopping over those pearly gates, and side straddle hopping through the pearly gates someday, it's like, are you going to hear, what I always say is, I want to hear God say to me, well done, good and faithful servant. If I don't hear that, it doesn't matter what the world tells me if I've been successful or not. It's, did I tap into the deepest potential that I had? And if I did, and I die empty, like my energy is empty, it's on E, then I'm going to hear that. That's what drives me. And we don't talk about that a lot. I try to live my life by example. But since you ask, it's every single day. It's trying to nurture the relationship with Jesus. And hey, how am I doing? What can I do to be better? Am I emulating that? Do kids look up to me? Do the coaches and the people I have the opportunity to network with? Because, man, one thing I've learned is life is short. You know that too, Coach. But losing my father at the age of 58, that definitely rocked my world. And I see it every day with people passing away, is we have a finite time here on earth. And I don't want to take it any day for granted. Let alone the opportunity that exists here in 2021.
Hey, listen, I know a lot of people, but you definitely qualify as a good and faithful servant. There's no question God put you here for a reason, and you give out every ounce of the energy I think He's given you to everybody. I got to thank you for being my first guest. I got to thank you for coming to the Yard, where faith and sports collide. You've been amazing. I appreciate you, T.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you.
Hey, folks, you need a Todd Durkin in your life. God puts them everywhere. That's the reason I call him an angel. That person may be somebody you deal with regularly and didn't look at it and see it and feel it that way. That person may be somebody you're yet to meet. But know that God puts people here next to you for a reason. And likewise, you could be that person. But for a lot of you, it's going to start with knowing God yourself, having a relationship with Jesus. that's something you can pray on. That's something you can talk to people about because it's something worth having. I think God put Todd Durkin in my life. Make sure you have God in yours. Appreciate y'all listening in today. Have a great week.